Good morning. We are going to begin the discussion this morning of the beginning of really the confluence of Israel and Rome. And we've been hinting at it. We've kind of talked a little bit about around it. We've talked about some of the main characters involved, but this is really kind of where Rome comes on the scene, and as we've talked about, there's so many pieces of this puzzle that really are going to really come together in a providential way, especially in consideration of what Jesus is going to do and what the gospel writers are going to do, and what Paul does. This concept of Pax Romana is a huge issue. Pax Romana, and it's the spreading of basically Roman philosophy, Roman construction, and of course, Rome was very much so connected to paganism. So Pax Romana, in many respects, was the spread of Roman philosophy, Roman rule, and it's because of that we're told that in the fullness of time, Jesus would come. God would send His Son. So in that respect, that's where we're going to begin. But we can't begin to talk about Rome without really beginning to talk about another nefarious character in the Bible, and that's Herod. So we're going to talk about the last of the Hasmonean time period, and where, of course, Rome comes into play. And we're really getting close to the birth of Christ, which is kind of where we kind of set about to go in this class to begin with. So with that, let's go to God in prayer. Our dear gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this time that we have together. We're so humbled by your providential care. And to Father, as we read about these events and these people in history, we know that you are in control. Dear Father, we may not understand all of your ways, and we may not understand how you work in history, but we know you do. And dear Father, the fact that you have throughout history just paved a road that has brought us Christ is amazing. And dear Father, as your people today that have been able to be grafted into your people, we're so grateful. We're so grateful for the gospel. We're so grateful for your Son who tore down that wall of partition that separated us. And dear Father, thank you for the blood that was shed ultimately at a particular time in history that was in the fullness of time. That was your time. Dear Father, we praise your name in the highest, and in Jesus' name, amen. All right. So, there's this guy by the name of John Hercanus, and this is an important guy. This is one of the Hasmoneans. And I'm going to just kind of, I'm going to go back here, but just to kind of give you this sense of where we're at. So we're here. John Hercanus is the son of Simon. Simon was one of the sons of Matthias. Simon's going to be that one, really the first one that kind of combines that role of high priest and king. Remember, we talked about that. That was something that was, by all accounts, flies in the face of Mosaic law. Because one was not to have those two offices were to be separated, and of course there are obviously good reasons for that. But obviously, as these people, as the Hasmoneans began to rule, and as you move on through history, they are not well liked, and they become corrupt in many respects. And a discussion at some point in the last class or the class before talked about, well, where did the Hasmoneans align themselves? Where initially they would certainly align themselves with the Pharisees. But later on, as you go throughout history, we're going to see some of these people actually begin to persecute the Pharisees. So as you see the timeline move onwards, down towards, of course, the Roman occupation, the Pharisees are persecuted because the Hasmoneans and that dynasty became more and more Hellenistic. So we're at John Hercanus. What's interesting about him is that you have to start with him when you talk about Herod. So let me go back Because John Hercanus, one of the things he's going to do, he's going to expand really the geographic territory of Israel. He's going to expand it to the north and to the south. But one of the things he does is he's going to go to that place that we talked about, Idumea. And remember we talked about that's kind of the comes from the name of a place that we talked about was Edom. And Edom was kind of a nickname for who? Esau, the brother of Jacob. All right. So we have this guy we have this guy, John Hercanus, who's going to go to Idumea. He's going to go to Samaria, and he's going to basically, by the edge of the sword, make people become Jews. He forcefully converts people to Judaism. That never really works out very well. Are you really going to get devout Jews after forcing them to convert? No. But among these that are converted are the ancestors of none other than Herod the Great. In fact, Herod's father, Antipater, and this is one of those names that I know you've seen, and it's kind of, when you see it, you want to pronounce it a different way, but it's Antipater. He's one of those ones that's forcibly converted, and he's going to play a major role in government moving forward, but he's also going to go to Samaria, and guess what he's going to do? He's going to tear down the temple at Mount Gerizim. So when Jesus is in Samaria talking with the woman at the well, they're probably sitting right with Mount Gerizim in view, and what used to be at the top? A temple that was torn down by none other than John Hercanus.
So you say temple, what kind of temple?
It was of course their site of worship.
A Samaritan kind
It was a Samaritan, yeah. So Samaritans, of course, did not go to Jerusalem, and a lot of that comes back to the time of Nehemiah, because they were so corrupt, and of course the people of Jerusalem did not want them coming to worship there. So I kind of always had a soft spot in my heart for the Samaritans, because although they were confused, they were really prejudiced. I mean, Jews they hated each other. And if you want to know at least one of the reasons why they hated each other, it's John Hercanus. I mean, he was hated by the Samaritans for doing just this. He's going to go and destroy the temple. When he dies, there becomes this, a constant civil war. And what happens when he dies, we'll talk about in a second, but he's going to have a son that's called Aristobulus. And this guy, of course, is going to, after just a short period of time, is going to die. His brother Alexander, Jannaeus, is going to rule, and he's going to die and leave as ruler his wife. And so we talked about her in the past, but of course his wife is going to marry a brother, and this is going to be, of course, and that's going to be, eventually it's going to come down to John Hercanus II, the grandson of John Hercanus. And he's very important because if you look at the dates here, now we're right in the period of time that we're getting close to Rome's arrival. So we're going to talk about what happens that results in the arrival of Rome. Now I want you to keep in mind that as we're talking through this, there are some big name characters that are working, and events are happening right now. So we have what's called a triumvirate that's in existence in Rome. And bonus points to who can name to me the three members of that triumvirate. They were all three consuls. There was no emperor at this time. Who's going to be the first true emperor? That's going to be Augustus. He's going to be basically of the family line of Caesar. By the way, Caesar was a family name. It wasn't, and eventually it became a title. So, of course, who's the one who kind of orchestrated the putting together of this triumvirate? A triumvirate was a three-part rule of the empire. Who's the first guy who kind of orchestrated it all? A guy by the name of Julius, not Dr. J, but Julius Caesar. Second one, not yet, he's later, but Pompey. Now Pompey and Julius Caesar were constant rivals, and eventually they're going to be actually fighting each other, and Julius Caesar would win out. But the third one was Cassius. So these three form this triumvirate, and they're actually out on all parts. Julius Caesar is in Gaul, which is modern-day France. Pompey's fighting up in Asia Minor, and of course, these conflicts that are going on. Of course, the Syrians, the Seleucids, ruled the area for so long. They were becoming weakened. They had basically formed a treaty with Israel, and they had some level of independence. Of course, they signed a letter of independence with the Seleucids, the Syrians. But because of just the wickedness and the corruption happening within the Hasmonean family, there becomes the need, of course, for Pompey. Pompey is going to hear about what happens. He's going to see an opening, a vacuum of power, and he's going to come down. Now, what are the circumstances that surround Pompey entering into Israel? Well, Pompey is going to be, of course, the guy in about 63 BC who is going to make Israel, put it under, of course, Roman rule. Now, was this part of God's plan? 100%. This was part of God's plan. And so when you think about the events in history, the events like, in 49 BC, if something really, really important happened, Julius Caesar crosses a famous river. Remember the name of the river? The Rubicon. I have been up where the Rubicon is, and it's actually just a very small stream you can wade across. But what was so important about Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon? Well, basically, ultimately, he's going to walk into Rome as a hero, and the Senate, everyone leaves because they think he's going to come in with an army and wipe them out. So he's going to come in. He's going to become, of course, really the first ruler, and he, of course, he's going to defeat he's going to defeat Pompey and others. But what he sets about doing is he's going to stabilize the empire. And so at the same time as there was kind of civil war going on in Rome, there was civil war going on in Israel. And when Rome gets their stuff together, they're going to, of course, occupy Israel, and there's going to be, at least some time, some stability. And that stability is going to be when Augustus comes in. And there's peace, and there's Pax Romana. And of course, major building projects are happening across the world. Roads are being built. Augustus is going to be the first one to implement fair taxation. He's going to be the first emperor to put in place a fire department, and many other things that were revolutionary. By all means, Augustus was, without question, the best of the Roman emperors. And of course, Luke chapter 2, of course, we know Jesus is going to be born in the days of Augustus Caesar, right? All right. So, Alexander Jannaeus has two sons. One's named John Hercanus, the other one's called Aristobulus. They're going to fight. Hercanus is going to be the one who kind of takes over this role of ruler. Aristobulus kicks John Hercanus out, and John Hercanus is going to go where? He's going to go to Idumea, where his grandfather forcibly converted everyone to Judaism. He's going to go there and form an alliance with this guy named Antipater. And this Antipater had two sons. Antipater had two sons. Who were his sons? You know one of them, at least. Herod the Great. And the second son, his name is Phasael. And so because of this political alliance, John Hercanus is going to ally himself with them, and then he's going to come back with an army, some of whom were mercenaries from Idumea. He's going to surround Jerusalem, where his brother Aristobulus kind of stole the throne from him. And there he is. Imagine, of course, the city of Jerusalem once again being besieged by a Hasmonean. Again, civil war, conflict, corruption was crazy. All right. So, Pompey is up in the north. He's a great military great military man. He's part of the council, big time player. He hears about what's coming in, and so he marches his army down, and of course, he comes to the city of Jerusalem, and what's he find? He finds the city under siege. And so what's he do? He sits down at a Starbucks with John Hercanus and has a conversation. Let's talk about this. And so Pompey was brilliant. And John Hercanus, of course, is going to play his cards very well and is going to say, listen, I will help you. I will basically sign a letter that states that we, of course, are under the rule of Rome. I'll stabilize and just put me back in power. So what does Pompey do? Pompey says, hey, that's a good plan, but you've got to swear allegiance to Rome. I'm going to let you be independent for a while, but you swear allegiance to Rome. I'll take out this other guy, but I'm not going to make you king. I'm not going to do that. I'm basically going to make you high priest, and I'm going to make this guy who I'm hearing about, this guy by the name of Antipater, he's going to be the governor. Okay? Thus the entry of the Herodian family. Now, was Antipater a Jew? Was Herod a Jew? By definition, no, not really. I would say that you can make some claim that they may have been forcibly converted, but they were Edomites. Now, you can say that were they connected to Judaism? Well, as far as Esau was. So these weren't really Jews. So Antipater has these two sons. Pompey is going to install Antipater as governor of the region. And he's going to put one son in the north in Galilee, and that's Herod. And he's going to put the other son in charge of, kind of overseeing the government of Jerusalem, that's Phasael. So here we are, and we have, of course, these amazing events happen. Of course, Hercanus is going to become high priest, and of course, we talked about Alexander Jannaeus. He was one who persecuted the Pharisees. So we talk about this over a period of time. The Hasmoneans became more and more Hellenistic, and just taking a step back, what is it that really kind of created the Sadducees and the Pharisees? Well, it was Hellenism. It was the idea of who was going to embrace Hellenism and who was going to try to stay with the old ways, keep faithful to the old law. And for the most part, the Pharisees were really, during this period of time, the good guys. I know that's hard to accept, but the Pharisees were really the good guys in the sense. They were really fighting to push away Hellenism. And so you see, in this particular case, Alexander Jannaeus killed a lot of Pharisees. And so Salome, his wife, is going to take rule. She's going to have two sons. Of course, the widow is Salome. She's going to rule. And of course, she dies. And so we have Aristobulus the second and Hercanus the second. So you kind of have these two guys, two brothers, vying for rule. And of course, we know what happens. Hercanus is going to get kicked out. He's going to go to Antipater. And of course, he's going to come back, lay siege. And he's going to be the one that is going to make an alliance with Rome and really take over rule in that regard. So the Roman Senate had authorized Pompey to take control of the eastern shores of the Mediterranean. And but really at this point, Rome is a republic. I know it's kind of hard for us to understand. Well, what's the difference between a republic and an empire? Who can venture an answer for that? What's the real difference?
Who makes the decisions?
Yeah, so it was really kind of, Rome at its core was a republic that centered around a senate. And the senate was the one who really governed power. And they did that by elected officials. To get into the Senate, of course, there was tremendous corruption. I don't know how much real voting took place, but it was by all accounts a fair way of representation. And the beautiful thing that Augustus did, Augustus, of course, transitions Rome from a republic to an empire, and he did it beautifully and subtly by making the Senate feel as though they were important, when in fact, he just became more powerful, and to where the Senate really almost was, a puppet. So, but at this time, it's a republic, and of course, that's kind of where we're at. So we have this Antipater II. He became the Idumean governor, and of course, he's going to have a son, Antipater II. Antipater II used, and again, Hercanus and Antipater are going to work together to put Hercanus back in power. And of course, he's going to arrange for Aretas, a Nabatean. And by the way, what Nabatean? Herod's mother was a Nabatean. Now, the Nabateans were, again, from that area of Edom. And the Nabateans specifically were the ones that lived and dwelt in Petra. What's very interesting about this site, just as a side note, is that when AD 70 happens, so you have the city, really kind of in the throes of war. There was revolt going on, and Kyle did a great job of talking about how the Christians, having listened to the Olivet Discourse, having listened to what Jesus said of what was going to happen, the signs of wars and all these types of things, guess what they do? We're not sticking around to find out what happens. And so they're going to leave Jerusalem. And among the places they're going to go to predominantly two places. One is Antioch, and the other one's here. Many of them are going to live and escape from what happens in AD 70 by going to this location. So, Hercanus gets these mercenaries that are going to come, and they're going to surround Jerusalem, and they're going to besiege Jerusalem. Aristobulus is taken captive to Rome. Hercanus opens the gate of Jerusalem, and Pompey walks in. Interestingly, side note, Pompey, of course, is a consul, and of course is doing all of this for the same reason that Julius Caesar is in Gaul, because the people followed military guys, and the more military accomplishments that you had, it kind of raised your bar, it raised your status among the Senate. So Pompey's going to go into Jerusalem. The first place he goes is to the temple. And of course, not really understanding the traditions, he walks right into the temple, and of course, what's his goal? He wants to rob it. He wants to take the gold. He wants to take whatever's valuable in there. And of course, I'm sure he may have heard about maybe the Ark of the Covenant or all these amazing gold pieces and all, whatever the case may be. So he walks in, walks right into the Holy of Holies, and walks into that section. Guess what he finds? Nothing. Not a single thing. The Ark of the Covenant's gone. There's no treasury. It's gone. No one really knows what happened, but Pompey leaves empty-handed. But again, is able to kind of put this notch under his belt. This is another area that Rome now occupies. I put this here. He goes into the Holy of Holies, which did not make him popular. And again, at this same time, Julius Caesar was leading Rome after the West. And they of course, are going to have this bitter rivalry when they get back. Julius Caesar is going to defeat Pompey to become lead consul. But Julius Caesar, of course, is going to make a trip over to Alexandria. And guess who's going to meet? He's going to, so at that time, it was the last Ptolemy the 13th. Ptolemy the 13th. So interestingly, Pompey, among others, is killed by Ptolemy. Well, Julius Caesar gets upset. He goes to Alexandria. He's going to end up killing Ptolemy the 13th. And while he's there, he's going to run into this very smart very beautiful, very savvy woman whose name is Cleopatra. Now, how many of you have seen the Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor? Okay, have you guys seen that movie? If you haven't, you're probably really young, like these kids up here. You guys have probably never seen that. You may not even know who Richard Burton is. Shame on you. Surely you know who Elizabeth Taylor is, but so do you guys remember the movie where she, of course, is desperate to get the attention of him, and so she rolls herself up in a carpet, have her servants bring the carpet in, and Julius Caesar has basically the carpet unroll, and this is the movie, and there's Cleopatra. Well, guess what? That really happened. If you watched that in the movie and said, boy, this is a really good screenplay, this is really good, that really happened. That, by all accounts, historians have recorded that Cleopatra gained her entrance in to see Julius Caesar by rolling herself on a carpet and unrolling herself and presenting herself there. Well, needless to say, she was a really smart, savvy woman. And of course, she's well known for using all of her assets to get her way. So she's going to have an affair with Julius Caesar, and of course that's going to form a pretty magnificent alliance. And Julius Caesar is going to have a son by her who dies at a young age. But Julius Caesar is going to go back, and guess what happens to him? The Ides of March. Okay, so Julius Caesar is going to be assassinated. Now, why is this important? We talk about this in Bible class. Why is it important? Well, if that did not happen, Augustus Caesar would never be in Luke chapter 2. He would never, and by all accounts, does God work in that way to bring about people who he wants in a particular position? Absolutely. Julius Caesar never could have been an Augustus. Never. And so Julius Caesar is going to be killed. And of course, after he's killed, there's going to be another triumvirate that is going to be, of course, again, another 3. And remember that the killers of Julius Caesar, of course, escape, and Mark Antony is going to go about trying to kill them. And so there's this race to kill all of those who were part of the assassination, and eventually that happens. And so it leaves really 2. It leaves Mark Antony and Octavius. Now, who was Octavius? Octavius, who again is going to become Augustus Caesar. Octavius was a nephew, actually a great nephew to Julius Caesar. And it's interesting that a couple of years before Julius Caesar dies, he is going to adopt Octavian as his son. If he had not done that, it would have created another civil war for sure. But when Julius Caesar dies, everyone knows who's going to take over. But it's not as clear because Mark Antony was a popular figure. Mark Antony, of course, is going to make a big show of going after the murderers of Julius Caesar, and there becomes a rivalry between the 2. Julius Caesar's dead. Mark Antony, of course, thinking, okay, I need to gain. So they split up the empire to rule or govern, and guess what part Mark Antony just so happens to get? Egypt. So Mark Antony meets up with Cleopatra. They fall in love. And that's where we have the Richard Burton, Elizabeth Taylor story. So that's what happens there. So Mark Antony, Cleopatra form an alliance. There's going to be this magnificent battle between Octavius. Anybody remember the name of the battle? It was a sea battle, very famous. So 60 BC, Pompey, Julius Caesar, Crassus form the first triumvirate. We talked about that. Pompey and Caesar fight each other. Pompey flees to Egypt. And as I said, Ptolemy the 13th is going to kill him. Caesar, with the help of our guy Antipater, won his battle in Egypt and went home. So again, Antipater is going to be, again, gaining alliances, gaining friendships. And Herod is most specifically become very close friends with Antony, Mark Antony. Okay, so Antipater is rewarded. He's made procurator. And by the way, that's the title that was given to someone else in the time of Jesus, who was the procurator. Pilate was a procurator, like a governor. Hercanus II confirmed as high priest. And then, of course, we talked about Herod's going to be in Galilee, Phasael in Judea. His father, of course, Antipater, is going to be killed. Phasael would eventually be killed. But you have basically there's going to be another uprising. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. So, again, Phasael was the brother of Herod. And this is kind of the family tree of dysfunction, the Jerry Springer tree of Maccabees and the Herod family. And as we talked about, we have Hercanus and Aristobulus. They're fighting. And of course, Aristobulus II is going to become the king and high priest. And so from this family tree, you can see these two. So from, again, part of the Hasmonean family, you're going to have Mariamne, who basically we can just call her Miriam, because you see some pronunciations of Miriam, but some call her Mariamne, and her brother Aristobulus III. So this is kind of course, as we know, Herod, in order to gain trust and to gain popularity, is going to do what? He's going to marry a Hasmonean princess, Mariamne. And so that, again, that's how all of this happens. 44 BC, Caesar's assassinated. Brutus and Caps, again, we kind of talked about this. I'm kind of ahead of the slides. Antipater, of course, was poisoned. Boy, lots of people end up with either a dagger in their back or mysteriously killed. And boy, I tell you what, this is going to happen a lot. Mark Antony, of course, makes Herod and Phasael joint rulers. Mark Antony was an oppressive ruler. A fight develops over the high priest position. And so we have this guy, and I just showed you a picture of him, this Aristobulus. He was kind of the son of Aristobulus, of the previous Aristobulus. So Aristobulus is going to, and this is, Rome's already there. He's going to form an alliance with the Parthians. And this is important because when he forms this alliance, and by the way, the Parthians are up in the Mesopotamia area, kind of maybe the remnants of the Persian Empire, you can say. But they were a powerful group. Rome really couldn't quite get rid of them. And so you're going to have this Hasmonean guy form an alliance with them to basically kind of gain position. And that's what happens. Hercanus was removed and his ears were cut off. Why were his ears cut off? That made him ineligible to be a high priest if his ears were cut off. You couldn't have that kind of deformity or that type of problem to be a high priest. So they did that purposefully. Phasael's captured, committed suicide. And what's Herod going to do during all this chaos? And so keep in mind, this is in 40 BC. This is 20 years after Pompey comes in. So, but again, Rome, Jerusalem's Rome's, but Rome's got their own issues going on. They got their Julius Caesar, Mark Antony issues going on. And so the Parthians align themselves with this Hasmonean, and everyone runs for cover. Herod is going to flee to Rome. And when he goes to Rome, he's going to, again, he was a brilliant guy. He was crazy. I mean, crazy, I don't know, as crazy you can get. But he's smart insofar he's going to go to Rome, he's going to go to the Senate, and he's going to basically say, and by the way, Mark Antony's there. Mark Antony's going to say, you know what, we trust you, Herod. We're going to, and at this point, when he's before the Senate, this is very important. He is going to be given the title King of the Jews by the Senate. And of course, in exchange, of course, he's going to go and, of course, be part of helping and assisting Rome to end this Parthian conflict. And that's what happens. Herod goes back with all these titles, including King of the Jews. And he's going to come back with the support of Rome. And And of course, they're going to appoint Herod as king of Judea, king of the Jews, hoping that he would help them defeat the Parthians. And of course, he did. Hercanus II. So again, keep in mind, Herod's constantly trying to make his way with the Jewish people. And the way you did that back then is aligning yourself with the Hasmoneans. So he's going to put Hercanus, ears gone and all, back in his position. And again, so he's going to come back. But eventually, even after he's back, Herod is going to see that he's executed. You see this happen a lot. Herod puts someone somewhere, he marries someone, he goes, that may not have been a good idea, I'm just going to get rid of them. And that's what he did. So Herod goes to Rome, we talked about that. Herod and Anthony, of course, become very good friends. At that moment, they become good friends, and when he comes back, he aligns himself with Mark Antony, and he chose poorly. Because Mark Antony, of course, was going to be defeated by Octavian in the Battle of Actium. Remember that? Remember that from history class? Going way back. Herod becomes king of the Jews. We talked about that. Takes this title, Herod the Great. He favors the Jews by getting Rome to let them worship God. Again, he was very good about that. But he was extremely Hellenistic. He was an Edomite. And now you have an Edomite ruling over God's people. Isn't this the irony of ironies? Who would have thunk? Right? But why did God allow Herod this? I mean, again, you think of all this, you think of, well, why would God let, and does Herod play a role in the life and the spread of the gospel? Of course. I mean, you think about the events that take place. And, Jesus is in Jerusalem. He's been before Pilate. He's going to go before, remember who he goes before? Herod Antipas. And what's a Herod Antipas wants to see? He wants to see him do some tricks. And so you see that happen. And then, of course, you see Antipas is going to be the one that does what? What is Antipas also known for? He had this palace in Jericho. What was he known for? He killed John the Baptist. So when Jesus goes before Herod Antipas, did Jesus know what he had done to his cousin? Sure he did. I mean, and yet, Herod says, all I want to see, I mean, would he have let Jesus go? If Jesus would have just, I don't know, turned some water into wine for him, done a few tricks? Herod says, this is great, you can go. But Jesus doesn't comply. Because Jesus is the king of the Jews, not Herod. And so I want you so on this point, turn your Bibles to Matthew chapter 2. We're going to just read the first few verses of Matthew chapter 2, if you'll follow along with me. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, and by the way, why did Joseph and Mary go to Bethlehem? And who conducted the census? Yeah. So who was the cause of Jesus being born in Bethlehem according to prophecy? Micah chapter 2? Who instigated that? You didn't think of it that way, did you? Augustus. Augustus makes Joseph and Mary go back to Bethlehem. And that's where the Son of God, the Son of Man, the King of Kings would be born because of a census. Now, how would God have gotten them there otherwise? Would God have gotten them there some other way? Sure. But what did he choose to do? To use Augustus to do that. So he why Bethlehem? What's the story there? Why go to Bethlehem? Again, just kind of using our knowledge of what we've covered so far. Why Bethlehem? City of David. Okay, it was the city of David. So, but who had connections to Bethlehem?
Joseph's family.
Joseph's family, but also who? Was Mary connected to the Davidic line? They both were connected to David. So I want you to think about this. By all accounts, Joseph and Mary had lineage directly back to the most popular king, which made them what? What did that make them? If you were connected and were in some way to a very important person, I mean, it made you nobles. It made you nobility. And yet, who is called king of the Jews? Herod, who wasn't even a Jew. But when you think about Joseph and Mary going back, certainly Joseph's family was there, but both of them were connected to the line of David. Both of them. It made them both nobles. And yet they go, and as peasants, back to Bethlehem. Peasants. Now, could God have easily made Joseph and Mary nobility, wealthy, landowners, vineyard owners? Wouldn't that have made sense for the King of Kings to be born to a wealthy noble? Wouldn't that have made a lot more sense to us? Wouldn't it? But it didn't make sense to the Father. Why? Okay, all right.
He would have glorified man if he had been born into royalty, but because he was born of peasants, it glorified God.
All those things are right. Who else? I mean, we can keep going. What's another reason why?
Humility is so important.
Okay,
in personal salvation, relationship with God.
right.
So it's modeled yet again.
Yeah. So when the Jews of that day, when they read of the Messiah, Psalms 110 it's a powerful psalm. If we get a chance, actually, next class, read Psalm 110. We're going to talk about that in connection to this. But they were looking for someone that was going to be again they had these misperceptions clearly. But when you read Isaiah, you read a suffering. I mean, you read about a suffering servant, not a royal king. But again, and again, the answer, the reason why God had His Son born in Bethlehem and raised in the backwater Whitley city of Israel, is because of the reasons that sorry about that, Nikki. Every time I say that, I always think of you, so I apologize. Hey, you're the example of. Okay, well, that's close enough. So Oneida would be the Cana of Nazareth. But hey, you were someone spectacular that came out of a backwater town. So you're a good example of that. But you think about that. Why would God want His Son raised in that way? And ultimately, Jesus could have so easily just said, you know what, God, I don't want to leave town. I want to stay here. I want to be a carpenter. I want to enjoy anonymity. He could have done that. But God has him leave that peaceful, again, small town feel to of course, start his ministry. But again, it was all about being the example of humility. And again, being a servant. Yes.
If Jesus would have been born in wealth and privilege, then people today would say, "Well, Jesus didn't get the suffer like we did."
That's a very good point, Matt. Yeah.
He judged us, so he didn't have to go through the trial of being born.
That's exactly right. Hebrews talks about how he, basically was human to the point where he understood all of our sufferings. So Mary, Joseph, they're going to go to Bethlehem. Let's finish the verse here. And behold, wise men came from the east to Jerusalem. We talked about those wise men. We talked about, this idea of Daniel being very familiar with these events taking place, possibly being one of these types of magi. Just to finish the verse, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews?" Jesus was the King of the Jews. I want you just to take away this one thing, and that is that in our lives as Christians, we have to choose whom we serve. We either serve God or we serve ourselves. And I will tell you that as we think about this dichotomy of Herod and Jesus, think about, again, who we choose to serve and how many times, and what are the characteristics that Herod possessed. We'll talk about that next class. But read Psalms 110, and we will continue this thought of Herod going through the Herodian family. So look at that, and we'll keep making our way through the interbiblical period. Thank you.